Hi, welcome to the quiz. You can answer along on quizalto.com, all for free. The exact URL of this quiz will be in the notes down below. Let's get started. Good luck. What is a common practice for managing IAM users in AWS IAM Identity Center? Assign permissions individually to each user. Disable MFA for users. Share user credentials with other accounts. Use groups to assign permissions to users. A common practice for managing IAM users in AWS IAM Identity Center is to use groups to assign permissions to users, simplifying the management and application of common policies. How can you grant temporary access to AWS resources in AWS Identity Center? By using IAM roles with temporary security credentials. By disabling MFA for specific users. By sharing the root user credentials. By creating new IAM users. You can grant temporary access to AWS resources by using IAM roles with temporary security credentials, allowing users or services to assume a role for a limited time. What is a benefit of using IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center? It reduces the cost of services. It allows a temporary access to resources. It increases the number of users in the account. It provides real-time monitoring of resources. IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center allow you to grant temporary access to resources, providing a secure way to delegate access across AWS accounts. What is the main function of IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center? To delegate access to users across AWS accounts. To increase network bandwidth. To monitor network traffic. To manage billing information. IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center are used to delegate access to users across AWS accounts, providing a secure way to grant temporary permissions without sharing long-term access keys. What is the main function of IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center? To increase compute capacity. To delegate access to users across AWS accounts. To manage billing details. To monitor network traffic. IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center are used to delegate access to users across AWS accounts, providing a secure way to grant temporary permissions without the need to share long-term credentials. How can you restrict access to AWS resources using IAM policies in IAM Identity Center? By granting access to all resources. By allocating additional storage to users. By defining a list of actions and resources allowed or denied. By running additional security checks. IAM policies in IAM Identity Center can be used to restrict access to AWS resources by defining a list of actions and resources that are either allowed or denied for a user, group, or role. What is the primary function of IAM policies in AWS Identity Center? Control network access to EC2 instances. Enable multi-factor authentication. Monitor AWS infrastructure performance. Define permissions for users, groups, and roles. IAM policies allow you to define permissions for users, groups, and roles, specifying what actions they can perform on specific resources. What can you do with IAM groups in AWS IAM Identity Center? Increase CPU performance. Allocate additional storage to users. Monitor network traffic. Group users and assign policies to all users in the group. With IAM groups in AWS IAM Identity Center, You can group users together and assign policies to all users in the group, simplifying the management of permissions and applying common policies. What is the function of IAM credentials in AWS IAM Identity Center? To reserve storage space for users. To authenticate users and grant access to AWS resources. To send emails and notifications. To manage DNS configurations. IAM credentials in AWS IAM Identity Center are used to authenticate users and grant them access to AWS resources securely, based on their permissions defined in IAM policies. How can you check the permissions assigned to an IAM user in AWS IAM Identity Center? By running a network scan. By viewing the user's permissions tab in the IAM console. By reviewing the user's billing history. By checking the user's email notifications. You can check the permissions assigned to an IAM user in AWS IAM Identity Center by viewing the user's permissions tab in the IAM console, which displays the policies attached to the user. What is the advantage of using IAM policy conditions in AWS Identity Center? To rotate database instance passwords. To control the cost of storage services. To add flexibility to policy definitions based on context. To monitor CPU utilization of EC2 instances. IAM policy conditions in AWS Identity Center add flexibility to policy definitions based on the context in which the policy is evaluated, allowing you to set conditions for when the policy should be enforced. What is the purpose of IAM groups in AWS Identity Center? To deploy AWS Lambda functions. To create RDS database instances. To monitor VPC network traffic. To manage sets of IAM users and manage their permissions collectively. IAM groups allow you to manage sets of IAM users and manage their permissions collectively, simplifying permission management. What is the purpose of IAM policies in AWS IAM Identity Center? To manage billing information. To monitor network traffic. To create new users. To define permissions for resources. IAM policies in AWS Identity Center are used to define permissions for resources, specifying what actions a user, group, or role can perform on specific resources. What is the recommended practice for managing IAM users in AWS IAM Identity Center? Share user credentials with other AWS accounts. Assign permissions individually to each user. Disable multi-factor authentication. Use groups to assign permissions to users. The recommended practice for managing IAM users in AWS IAM Identity Center is to use groups to assign permissions to users, allowing for easier management and application of common policies. What is the function of IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center? To increase memory storage. To manage billing details. To monitor network traffic. To grant temporary access to resources. IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center are used to grant temporary access to resources, providing a secure way to delegate access across AWS accounts without the need for long-term access keys. What is the primary purpose of IAM policies in AWS IAM Identity Center? To manage billing information. To create new users. To define permissions for resources. To monitor network traffic. The primary purpose of IAM policies in AWS IAM Identity Center is to define permissions for resources, specifying what actions a user, group, or role is allowed or denied on specific resources. What is the benefit of IAM policy conditions in AWS Identity Center? To increase CPU capacity of EC2 instances. To manage backups for RDS databases. To improve security by setting conditions for when policies are enforced. To automate deployment of ECS clusters. IAM policy conditions in AWS Identity Center improve security by allowing you to set specific conditions for when policies will be enforced, adding an extra layer of control to access management. What is the primary function of the AWS IAM Policy Simulator in AWS Identity Center? To manage VPN connections. To simulate and test the effects of IAM policies. To provision new EBS volumes. To automate database scaling for Aurora. The AWS IAM Policy Simulator allows you to simulate and test the effects of IAM policies before applying them, helping you evaluate the permissions granted by policies. How can you increase security in AWS IAM Identity Center? By enabling additional network ports. By increasing CPU speed. By reducing memory usage. By enabling multi-factor authentication. One way to increase security in AWS IAM Identity Center is by enabling multi-factor authentication for an added layer of protection for user accounts. What is a benefit of using IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center? It reduces the cost of services. It increases the number of users in the account. It provides real-time monitoring of resources. It allows a temporary access to resources. IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center allow you to grant temporary access to resources, providing a secure way to delegate access across AWS accounts. What is the purpose of the IAM console in AWS IAM Identity Center? To monitor CPU performance. To deploy applications. To manage user access and permissions. To allocate storage resources. The IAM console in AWS IAM Identity Center is used to manage user access and permissions, allowing you to create and manage IAM users, groups, roles, and policies. What is the function of IAM groups in AWS IAM Identity Center? To allocate resources to users. To monitor CPU usage. To manage network traffic. To group users and apply policies to all users in the group. IAM groups in AWS IAM Identity Center allow you to group users together and apply policies to all users in the group, simplifying the management of permissions. What is the purpose of the identity providers in the AWS Identity Center? To manage encryption keys for S3 buckets. To enable users to log in using existing credentials from external sources. To monitor EBS volume performance. To deploy CloudFront distributions. Identity providers in the AWS Identity Center enable users to log into AWS using their existing credentials from external sources, such as Active Directory or SAML providers. What is the purpose of the IAM console in AWS IAM Identity Center? To manage user access and permissions. To allocate storage resources. To deploy applications. To monitor CPU performance. The IAM console in AWS IAM Identity Center is used to manage user access and permissions, allowing you to create and manage IAM users, groups, roles, and policies. What is the function of IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center? To increase network bandwidth. To manage billing information. To monitor network traffic. To delegate access across AWS accounts. IAM roles in AWS IAM Identity Center are used to delegate access across AWS accounts, providing a secure way to grant temporary permissions without sharing long-term access keys. And that's a wrap. Thanks to everyone who participated. Remember, you can answer along on quizalto.com, where you can keep track of your progress and find much more quizzes. We hope you had a fun and challenging time. Until next time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more. Hit the bell icon to be notified as soon as we upload. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts or suggestions, and if you think this video is worth sharing with someone who could benefit from it, please forward a link to them. See you next time. Thanks for watching.